It may seem strange that one whose aim and desire is to be considered an American writer should first launch his adventurous craft on the tide of English popular favor, rather than entrust it to the currents likely to be more favorable or less dangerous of his own native depths. This has come about in great part by accident. I happened to be on this side of the ocean when this volume reached its completion. Circumstances prevented my return to America, and yet I was eager without delay to try my experiment on the public. For it is an experiment, apart from the question as to whether or not I am capable of putting life and spirit into the vast body of facts and events that concern the past of so enormous a political creation as Germany. I have been assured from competent side that there is not sufficient interest in the subject to warrant a work like the present. My belief is that if there is not, there ought to be. Not to speak of the breathlessly exciting incidents of the German Reformation, nor of the proud emancipation of the grand modern empire from the trammels of disunity and disorganization. There is that in the fortunes and misfortunes of a Charlemagne and Henry IV, of a Barbarossa, a Henry VI, and an Emperor Frederick II, which should stir the heart of any observer, no matter what his nationality. The rise and fall of the medieval German Empire is in itself a subject boundlessly interesting, boundlessly important. Open your eyes, O ye students of men and of institutions, and see how Europe has come to be what it is, and how near it came to being something quite different. If Italy had remained under the sway of Germany, if Frederick Barbarossa or his successors had done away with the papal power, as they often seemed about to do, would the fate of England and France have been the same? And yet what do the ordinary English or American readers know of the medieval German Empire, or, to give it the full title it enjoyed when in its prime, of the Holy Roman Empire of the German nation? And how should they know anything about it, considering how scanty and how insignificant is the literature on the subject? Bryce's essay is almost the only very recent book to which one can point, and this is, as it was meant to be, the merest fleeting sketch. What does it tell us of the daily movements and occupations of the medieval emperors, of the condition of things in their lands, of their legislative measures, or of their wars? I think I am right in saying that there is no narrative history of Germany, apart from a few translations of antiquated German works and a few compendiums which certain ladies and gentlemen have compiled in their leisure hours. In the English language. In this regard, I think I am right in saying that there is no narrative history of Germany apart from a few translations of antiquated German works and a few compendiums which certain ladies and gentlemen have compiled in their leisure hours. In the English language. In this regard, England has been treated better by German scholars. Lappenberg and Pauli's History of England is written with all the care and devotion that native historians could have shown. The present work is the result of much labor and of years of enforced exile from home. May all these pains not have been May all these pains not have been in vain. May the book not fall dead as soon as it is born, but rather may it live and play its part in the world vigorously. May it make its friends and, if need be, its enemies be hated deeply and loved warmly. E.F.H. London, April 15th, 1894. Since the comparatively recent time when, by the efforts of Wolff, Niebuhr, and Ranke, historical investigation was raised to the rank of a science, the whole of the German history has been rewritten. New sources of information have been opened up, old problems in many cases solved. More than 50,000 historical essays and other works relating to Germany have been revived by the Jahresbericht der Geschichtswissenschaft. In the 13 years alone between 1878 and 1890, not in one, but in many ways has history writing been revolutionized in our own day. In the first place, the immense importance of text criticism has been recognized. No scholar now edits a chronicle or document of the past without distinguishing carefully between the original, or at least the oldest obtainable, manuscript and the horde of later copies with all of their accumulated errors. The study of paleography has enabled men to determine at least in what century a given text was written, and many a document or chronicle long considered very ancient has been found to be by a comparatively modern hand, and vice versa. By comparing the changes to and the omissions of words and clauses in a number of different manuscripts of a given work, the prototype or original manuscript from which all the others were taken can often be discovered. What this method signifies for the truth and accuracy of a historical text may be made clear from the case of Einhard's Life of Charlemagne, written shortly after the death of the great hero. Of this valuable writing there are 80 manuscripts extant, of which all but a very few are worthless copies made in the course of centuries, not from the original, but one from the other. The later scribes and copyists, too, were men far less capable of performing such a task than are many schoolboys of today. It is only modern scholars who have been able to establish the relationships of these Einhard texts to each other and to sift the later ones of their accumulated errors and interpolations, and the case just mentioned is but one among hundreds. It must be remembered in this connection that in the Middle Ages, as parchment grew scarcer, or at least more expensive with time, it became the custom to contract almost every word of more than one syllable, and that the next copyist often had to use his imagination as to the real word that was intended. Many of the manuscripts of the 13th century seem a mere mass of signs and tokens of abbreviation. How often, too, not to speak of interpolations, wittingly and wantonly made for a given purpose, have marginal remarks of a reader or commentator, when attributed by a later scribe to the original author, and placidly incorporated in the new copy. Altogether, the study of paleography and of original historical sources gives one an amazing insight into the peculiarities, the follies, and the weaknesses of our forefathers. The abbot of a monastery interpolates or otherwise falsifies a charter of privileges to gain or preserve this or that right, or to raise the value of these or those relics. A chronicler does not hesitate to put down fictitious fictitious details which may add to the glory of the ancestors of a family which gives him its patronage. More than half the charters attributed to Merovingian times have been proved to be fraudulent in either one way or another. Follow the stream back to its source. Reconstruct your edifice from the Follow the stream back to its source. Reconstruct your edifice from the very foundation. Find out the original authority for every assertion. Such are the watchwords of the modern school of historians. How many extravagant and yet long credited assertions concerning Charlemagne have been traced back to the gossipy and far from voracious monk of Saint Gall, who wrote more for the amusement than for the edification of Charles the Bald, and Heinrich von Sybel, now the Nestor of German historians, has shown that the chronicle on which most of the modern accounts of the First Crusade have been based was never intended, even by its original author, to be taken seriously. It is for medieval times especially that most astonishing difficulties have to be met and overcome by the modern investigator. For this, the peculiarities of the old chroniclers are mostly responsible. It is for medieval times especially that the most astonishing difficulties have had to be met and overcome by the modern investigator. For this, the peculiarities of the old chroniclers are mostly responsible. There was a formalism, for instance, that seemed to belong to good tone among writers of a given period. We find one author, Lambert of Hersfeld, who seems to have a regular formula for conspiracies. They all come about in the same way, and the details are repeated in almost the same words. It is most usual, too, and the blame for it attaches to Livy, who set the example for Latin writers, for chroniclers to put set speeches in the mouths of those with whom they are dealing, speeches which they never by any chance could possibly have uttered. Others will relate interviews. It is Lambert again who sins in this way, as though they themselves had been actually present, when we know for certain that the two persons concerned were absolutely alone and would never have been likely to repeat even the general tenor, let alone the actual words of what had passed between them. It was the custom all through the Middle Ages for one writer to tacitly embody whole passages, whole pages, and even whole chroniclers. It was the custom all through the Middle Ages for one writer to tacitly embody whole passages, whole pages, and even whole chronicles of another in his own work. There was probably no intent to deceive. The object was to secure a good work, and to continue it, if possible, for one's own cloister library. The historian of today has to distinguish what is borrowed from what is original, and in the great modern collections of medieval sources, the Monumenta of Germany or the Rolls series of England, the borrowed, so far as it can be ascertained, will be found to be printed in smaller type. But it often seems impossible to tell who was the original author and where he lived, who copied from whom, and whether both perhaps did not borrow from a third. It is exactly in this manner of analyzing chronicles and tracing the different parts back to their origins that German scholars have performed their greatest services to the studious world. Every clue is followed, every similarity of style investigated. Passages are often fathered without the shadow of a doubt on this or that older writer. Perhaps the most striking case of all is that of the Altäche Annals, edited by the late Wilhelm von Giesebregt. A number of different chroniclers of the 10th century who could not have known the writings of each other showed a remarkable similarity in their description of certain events. Giesebregt came to the conclusion that they must all have borrowed from one and the same source, and excerpting and comparing all that the different writers had in common, he edited and published the lost prototype. It is an actual fact that the original chronicle, the Annales Altahenses, was later discovered, and that Giesebrigt's conjectural readings were found, as far as they went, to be almost absolutely correct. Nor are text criticism and the reconstruction of lost chronicles by any means the only branches in which modern scholarship has improved the writing of history. Not only the works of dead and gone chroniclers have been tested and searched, but their lives and opinions as well. It is safe to say that no considerable writer of the Middle Ages is without his careful biographer in the present century. Germany especially possesses a well-disciplined standing army of investigators recruited yearly from her great universities, and ready at a given signal to begin the fight in any quarter where obscurity or error is found to lurk. The deeper one goes, the more one finds how important it is to know the character and tendency of a given chronicler, especially of one who is our sole authority for this or that assertion. Was he well informed? Did he move personally in the circles where the events that he describes were taking place, or does he write by hearsay of things that happened in some distant part of the land? How much more weighty is a word of blame from one who can be proved to be well disposed, on the whole, towards the personage of whom he writes. How worthless, often, the verdict of a political opponent, especially in the medieval chronicles. The number of accusations is legion that can be proved to be utterly groundless. Our forefathers of 1,000 years ago were, if possible, even more partisan in their judgments than we are today. They were more under the ban of fixed and formal ideas. Their minds were more closely sealed against anything new or unexpected. Everything was churchly. There was no such thing as a public opinion. The prince who plundered or oppressed a monastery in which a given monk was writing, and there are centuries during which no one but monks did write, or who may only have insisted too sternly on his own just rights, goes down in the pages of history as the Antichrist in person. However beneficial to the land as a whole his reign may have been, and vice versa, the Frankish king Clovis, wholesale fratricide and breaker of every kind of sacred oath and treaty, marches forth in the pages of the pious Gregory of Tours as a God-sent champion to fight the just fight of Trinitarianism against the Arian heresy. The historian's task would be lighter indeed if all chroniclers were as honest and as transparent as Luitpold of Cremona, a 10th century bishop. In his case, it is comparatively easy to tell what to believe and what to attribute to wounded feelings. Luitpold informs us at the very beginning that he is going to punish the king and queen of northern Italy for wrongs inflicted on himself. With this end in view, he calls his chronicle of the times the Antapodosis, or Book of Retribution. Apart from the characters and the prejudices of ancient writers, there are certain peculiarities, the discovery of which vastly alters the trust and confidence that we are justified in placing in them. It has always been known, for example, that medieval historians have borrowed much of their phraseology from the ancient classics. Ovid and Virgil, Livy and Sallust are the forcing houses whence all the fairest flowers of medieval rhetoric have been culled. It is only within the last 10 or 15 years that this propensity has been systematically investigated. How far has the truth suffered by being crushed into this classic garb? That is the question that is now everywhere being asked and answered. Einhardt's characterizations of Charles the Great are taken in great part direct from Suetonius. Raguin, the historian of Frederick Barbarossa, describes the siege of Milan in the very words in which Josephus tells of the conquest of Jerusalem, yet applies those words with singular skill and aptitude. There is a detailed description, for instance, of an octagonal tower, which we find from independent sources to tally exactly with the true state of affairs. A famous example is Lambert of Hersfeld's vivid description of the hardships which the Emperor Henry IV endured while crossing the Alps in winter to humble himself before Gregory VII at Canossa. What a picture we are given of the king sliding down the icy slopes on ox hides, of his intense sufferings from cold and hunger, yet the account is taken bodily from Livy, the name of Hannibal being altered to that of Henry. One may say Lambert undoubtedly did say to himself that the fatigues and dangers of a winter journey over the Alps are much the same in all ages. The poet Angilbert, whose verses deal with many of the events of Charlemagne's time, was not so consistent in his description of Aix-la-Chapelle. He borrows Virgil's account of Carthage, and, forgetting that Aix lies inland, boasts of her splendid harbor. This analyzing of the language and peculiarities of style of medieval authors, taken in connection with other criterions, has led often to the discovery that writings were spurious. There are expressions in the forged Isidorian decretals, that gigantic swindle on which the popes from Nicholas I down based many of their most exalted claims, that were copied from works which appeared 3 centuries after the dates claimed for some of the several documents. It is in great part through methods here touched upon that the famous Florentine Chronicle of Malaspini has been proved to be a forgery compiled at a time much later than its professed date, for the purpose of glorifying the ancestors of a certain family. It is this same criticism and comparison of original historical sources that has led to the discarding of many a pleasant anecdote, many a stirring incident that had long been believed. It is this same criticism and comparison of original historical sources that has led to the discarding of many a pleasant anecdote, many a stirring incident that had long been It is the same criticism and comparison of original historical sources that has led to the discarding of many a pleasant anecdote, many a stirring incident that had long been believed.